why can't we be united? Division only brings us ruin and strife. Brothers, why can't we be united? So we say, unity in diversity. Unity in diversity. Unity in diversity. Unity does not mean the same. Let me tell you about the spirit of the new wave. Let me tell you about someday. Let me tell you about the spirit of the new wave. Let me tell you about someday. Garden is a garden when it has variety. The flowers enhancing one another.
The principal characteristic of the age, the coming of age of humanity, is unity. Humanity has arrived at the point that it can see itself as one people. It can see itself as one people and the earth as a common homeland. And Baha'u'llah says, the well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is established. This is the next great challenge ahead of the human race. The human race will not advance further. Civilization will not advance further. We will not solve our problems, whether they're environmental or questions of disarmament or questions of racial harmony or until we solve this one problem. And we have it all backwards. We have the naive idea that unity is some far-off goal, perhaps. First of all, we must solve this problem and that problem. Well, all we do is stagger deeper and deeper and deeper into the morass of our own making.
I'm John Smith.
Hi, and I'm Pamela Bradley, and this is Unity in Diversity, a program of the Memphis area Baha'is. And as you just heard from Douglas Martin, a Canadian Baha'i, who is talking about unity, our program today is going to really take a look at what Baha'is mean when they talk about unity. The little snippet we saw at the beginning is Douglas Martin, and we have seen the beginning of an interview with him just prior to his election to the Universal House of Justice of the Baha'i Faith. Paul, what is the Universal House of Justice?
Well, the Universal House of Justice, Pam, is a very important body in the Baha'i Faith. And I think it is an example of what unity means in the faith and how the Universal House of Justice was born out of a sense of unity. When the prophet founder of the Baha'i Faith, Baha'u'llah, passed or ascended to the heavens, he named his successor, his son, Abdul-Baha. And Abdul-Baha, when he passed, had a successor in his will, which was Shoghi Effendi. But, you know, one of the most difficult things in all previous religions is the succession, the interpretation of the faith, and the unity of the revelation. And so the Universal House of Justice came about as a result to preserve the unity of the faith. And I think we're going to hear a lot more about how the unity of the faith is preserved and what unity means in the Baha'i faith.
Well, good. So we can just take a look at more of the interview with Douglas Martin.
Challenges facing the world come from the teachings of Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i Faith. In his writings, Baha'u'llah describes the nature of justice and unity necessary for world peace and the progress of humanity. In this program, Mr. Douglas Martin of the Office of Public Information of the Baha'i International Community talks about Baha'u'llah and his vision of our common future.
We are hearing from every side. All the media, all the sources of information in our world are now telling us ever more frequently that we are approaching the end of one millennium, the beginning of a new one. It seems to me, as a Baha'i, that what this realization does, is to throw into sharper focus the crucial need facing the human race. The crucial need facing the human race is to find, and the desperate need of the human race, is to find a unifying vision of the nature of man and society. We have spent the last century, roughly speaking, trying out all kinds of ideological formulae that were presented to us by Marxism, fascism, and so on. And what has happened is that their interpretations of history, their promises for the future have simply been exploded. They have collapsed in on themselves. They have exhausted themselves. We have arrived at the end of this present millennium no longer having any certainty. It is inconceivable that without a common conviction about the course and purpose of human history, that foundations can be laid for a global society in which the mass of humanity can commit themselves. What interests me, whether I was a Baha'i or not, I think I would be interested in, is that precisely such a vision emerges in the writings of Baha'u'llah.
You know, Pam, certainly talking about unity, he's talking about the crucial need for mankind to have unity as some sort of a long-range goal, because, as you know, without unity, we squabble, we fight, we bicker, and we carry on various games. But I think in the long run, what he's talking about is that the civilization, the world, we need to be united as a human race, not just as split factions of the human family, but as one unit.
In fact, I think what he's saying is that there is no civilization, there is no human race unless we achieve this unity. And I think, yes, that he's alluding to the long run, meaning that the will of God throughout history has been to create a unified humanity, but it has taken several stages in the development of humanity to get to the point now where we can begin to realize what unity really means. And the message of Baha'u'llah is to bring about the unity of all of humankind. And we can do that now because we have the technology to view all of the people on the planet as being members of one human race. We know scientifically that we're members of one human race. All of these things that we really could only speculate about before Baha'u'llah's time in the 19th century, we are able now to do scientifically and technologically, spiritually. We're beginning to see that the religions truly are one, and that the planet Earth is an organism, a unified organism of various parts working together really in unity to hold the Earth together, to hold the planetary system together. And now the time is for humanity to realize without some sense of unity that there won't be any human race to be talking about or doing anything with.
I've got an important question. Say, for an example, if you, Paul, were not convinced that we needed unity. Let's say you were in the audience tonight and you heard the man talking about unity. Why wouldn't you want to achieve this unity? If you knew nothing of it except for what you heard on this program and they talked about unity, what would keep you and you from wanting to achieve this unity?
I think one thing is that people can be, I think most people in their hearts really understand that unity is imperative. On the other hand, I think that there are factions in society that feel like we have to maintain separatism in order to maintain our identity or our strength, because historically there has been a strength in a particular group. And I think that there are still people who feel, are adherents to the idea that, you know, not getting mixed up, so to speak, with others is a stronger avenue for success. But actually, we're realizing that that really is not the case, that it takes the diverse thinking of all people to bring about the kind of unified action that will keep the planet surviving.
Let me ask Paul a question then. As Pam has said, there's strength in certain ethnic groups banding together for a common cause, as we've seen in our recent history in this country. But what would break them out of the mold? What does a Baha'i faith have to offer people that will allow them to become united without losing their identity?
Well, I think very easily. I mean, unity is a process, and we talk a lot about unity, but and it's a process, it's a practice. But the unity itself is built on the principle of oneness, and that's a very profound principle. It's not just an intellectual idea. It is something. It says that all religions are one, and that mankind is one family. That is the basis for the principle of oneness. And Pam has said that before many times, that we are all cousins, 50th, at least 50th cousin. So I think for a person out there who is wondering why this is important, it isn't sort of an intellectual idea, something you think about. You have to internalize it. You have to believe it. You have to live it. And that's what becoming a Baha'i means, is that you internalize the principle of oneness. When you see another person who is of a different ethnic origin, you realize that person is part of your family. They are not someone different, of a different race or of a different whatever, but they are cousins that came from a different part of the world. Now, I would say just one other thing, and that is when we talk about the process of unity, we're talking about really linchpins of that is itself is built on something very important, and that is a sense of justice and equity. And so, you know, a person who is, say, African American and European American sitting here, I mean, you can work out all the problems as long as you do it with a sense of justice and equity. You bring that to the table, and I think we can achieve unity in any kind of situation.
Okay. So what you're saying is, we're going right back to the film here in a second, but with justice as sort of the linchpin of this process of unity, the different groups and ethnic groups can become united and still not be washed out, so to speak, not be left out of the process and losing their identity. And this is what the Baha'i Faith is talking about. Is this what you're saying?
That's right. And Douglas Martin, if we can return to the interview, is going to give our audience a little bit more information, more specific information about Baha'i unity. So if we'll see a little bit more of that interview.
Baha'u'llah foresaw what lay ahead of humanity. And his prescriptions, of course, are as relevant today. It's just that now at last God has our attention, I guess you could say, because we at last have decided, generally speaking, that all the real issues facing us at the end of this century, at the end of this millennium, are issues of collective action. There is no significant issue today that is not a global issue. No significant issue that is not a challenge to unity. No significant issue that does not challenge us to free ourselves from our parochial attachments, from lesser identities to this race or this religion or that religion, this nation or that nation, or ideology one from another. The challenge is to free ourselves. We know this. Most of us are aware of this. The effort of will that's required. First of all, we simply need a place to stand where we can simply be human beings, where we can simply be citizens of the earth. Doesn't mean that we give up our countries any more than I'm a Canadian, for example. Toronto is my home. I love the city. I'm no less a Torontonian just because I'm a Canadian. These things are not contradictory. They're in fact quite the opposite. In fact, they reinforce one another. Similarly, you become a citizen of the world. You become genuinely conscious of yourself, first and foremost as a human being. And this is perfectly harmonious with being a Canadian or Japanese or Norwegian or whatever you happen to be. There's no conflict, whatever. Quite the opposite. But we need a place to stand. We need a rallying point, as we have always in our history needed. And Baha'u'llah provides this, and it was this essentially that he offered to the leaders of the 19th century world, in which they rejected. And what Baha'u'llah says is that humanity has developed capacities that have prepared it for its coming of age, have prepared it for the age of maturity, that is the real experience that a human race is having today. What is that? What that is, the principal characteristic of the coming of age of humanity is unity. Humanity has arrived at the point that it can see itself as one people. It can see itself as one people and the earth as a common homeland. And Baha'u'llah says The well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is established. This is the next great challenge ahead of the human race. The human race will not advance further. Civilization will not advance further. We will not solve our problems, whether they're environmental or questions of disarmament or questions of racial harmony or until we solve this one problem. And we have it all backwards. We have the naive idea that unity is some far-off goal, perhaps. First of all, we must solve this problem and that problem. Well, all we do is stagger deeper and deeper and deeper into the morass of our own making. It's like Baha'u'llah says, unity is like the comb. The comb runs through the hair, everything flows with it. You can't tease all the tangles out with your fingers. Unity is the challenge, and just as each of the other manifestations of God have come with a specific capacity to call out new qualities in humanity, the distinguishing characteristic of the revelation of Baha'u'llah is to make possible the unification of humanity through the development of the consciousness in humanity of its oneness. Let me just conclude what I'm saying, if I may, by talking briefly about what Baha'u'llah said represented the heart of his mission, focal point of it. As I've already explained, he said that we live in the age of the coming of age of the human race. Mankind is on the threshold of its maturity. We will be mature when we are living as a united humankind in a society that is truly universal, that accepts the whole diversity of humanity without putting one lower than the rest, and so on. Now, he said that the characteristic of this time is that for the first time, I may have mentioned this already, humanity is capable of seeing itself as one people in one global homeland. And this fact makes possible what he termed a new covenant between God and humankind. Now, this is fascinating. He says literally, there is open to mankind a new relationship with God that never existed before. It is possible for humanity, by turning to God, by embracing God's revelation for today, by beginning to order its affairs according to the standards of that revelation, by accepting the full equality of women in human affairs, reorganizing human affairs so that women play as equals with men, totally abandoning racial prejudice of any kind, encouraging, celebrating racial integration in its most complete form, so-called racial intermarriage, and so on. The establishment of a world government to which national governments will surrender a degree of their sovereignty, the organization of the economic resources of the planet for the benefit of the entire human race, the encouragement of the application of the scientific method, as I've already mentioned, I think, to all the phenomena of existence, this balance between religion and science, for example. He said if humanity, and let me add also, certain moral principles that impinge on the individual very closely. You know, the thing about God is he sees things differently than we do. He has certain priorities that are different from the priorities, sort of the cultural patterns that we have grown up with. And for example, something that the revelation of God for this day condemns as a very, very serious offense is backbiting and gossip. Well, this is certainly not, generally speaking, regarded as a shortcoming. It's a higher art form for many people in our society. But in this age, the age which must be characterized by unity, it strikes at the very heart of unity. It is poisonous. And so he said, humanity is challenged for the next generations to come to train itself out of this particular habit. There are many other things. The use of narcotics, for instance, are condemned. That is condemned very, very severely. He speaks of it as extinguishing the life of the soul. But interestingly enough, The only other thing he speaks of with the same vehemence is backbiting. He signals, and this is certainly not an order of priorities. I think your average person in Tehran or any other city today would be immediately comfortable with it. Takes some little adjustment. In any event, he says that if, as humanity, because there's no if about it, we believe that humanity is moving in that direction, as he describes it, as humanity embraces the revelation of God for today, as it reorganizes its own thinking, its own attitudes, its own organization of its affairs, along those lines laid out for it by the revelation of God, that mankind will enter into a new relationship with God, and that the fruit of this new relationship will be the emergence of a new race, a new human race that will be as distinct from the present races, so-called races of our planet, as they are from one another. A race which will not be characterized by shades of color or shapes of eyes or noses or ears or something. It will be a race that is, because it is human, it will exemplify qualities that are at present latent in the peoples of the world as we exist today. And that new race of man, Baha'u'llah says, is beginning to emerge. Already, the influence of this impulse has drawn into its embrace people who represent the entire diversity of the human race. I mean the whole diversity. There is no spot on the planet where the pattern of life taught by Baha'u'llah is not being pursued by people who regard themselves as believers in him, followers of his path. The Britannica Yearbook, a couple of years ago, 1988 or 89, pointed out that the Baha'i community is the most widely spread religious, if you want to call it just a religious community, on earth, with the sole exception of Christianity. But we've been at it less than 100 years, and yet it is everywhere. We know that in Canada, it's in Eskimo villages in the Arctic and Indian reserves all the way across Canada. We know that it's in Andean villages throughout Latin America and the most remote islands of the Pacific. You name it. Remote African villages, pygmy villages, wherever human beings are, there you find this Baha'i community. The sheer spiritual energy required to accomplish that in the space of a few decades has no parallel in modern history. What Baha'u'llah brings, that is a plus, I suppose you could say, is a plan that embraces man's social relationships. That is a plan and a vision for the collective reorganization of human affairs, for the seizing of the responsibility for the collective future of the human race. And that is the covenant. That is the essence of Baha'u'llah's message.
We've been hearing from Douglas Martin, a Canadian Baha'i, talking about unity, and I hope that the audience was really paying attention to what Douglas Martin was saying, the points that he brought up about unity, and the whole reason for God revealing the Baha'i Faith is really to bring about the unity of humankind. The Baha'is of Memphis are offering this publication to anyone who would like to call in, The Vision of Race Unity, America's Most Challenging Issue. This is available by calling 278-2080. We'd also like to invite you to the Institute for Healing Racism that meets the third Tuesday of each month at Prescott Baptist Church. This is something that is promoted and supported by the Baha'is of Memphis. If you'd like to find out about that, call us 278-2080 as well. I also want to mention that Douglas Martin was talking about the unity of all of humanity, and we have a publication, a very short pamphlet that we'd like to make available, and inside this pamphlet it shows the beauty, the garden of humanity that Douglas Martin was talking about, and gives more specific information about the Baha'i Faith. And you can get any of these publications, which are free of charge, by calling 278-2080. We'd also like to invite anyone to come to a unity feast that are held the last Sunday of each month, and you can find out about those by calling us as well.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you, Pam. Well, one of the things that I noticed during Mr. Martin's speech, that he talked about the people from the various parts of the world, of various different countries, the Andes and up in Alaska, and also in the, just wherever there are people, they're drawn together by a common cause. What's the glue? What's the magnet that holds these people together? That's the question. That's the most important question, is the magnet that holds them together.
I agree. And I again go back to the process of unity, or internalize and actually believe in and live in the principle of oneness, because unless people in the former Republic of Yugoslavia recognize each other as members of the same family, there will continue to be the sort of internal strife that occurs there. Unless people in Rwanda recognize each other as part of the same family. In fact, I heard a beautiful quote on the radio the other day by a woman who said, you know, they are our sisters and our brother. We forgive those who have killed those. But unless that is recognized, then you will continue to have that internal strife. And I'm reminded of what Douglas Martin said: we will not have peace until and unless we recognize unity.
I think that's right, John. I wanted to just briefly mention, when Paul is talking about the situation in Rwanda or Bosnia, that these kinds of strifes and turmoil that humanity is undergoing has been addressed by the message of Baha'u'llah. When Baha'u'llah came more than 100 years ago, he brought the message of God, which is unity. And we know that if we rely upon God, that he will bring to us the healing balm that we need, and that healing balm really is the recognition of oneness, and the recognition that unless we have unity, we will not be achieving the will of God, and we will not be able to maintain ourselves and recognize that we are one family that we can rejoice together in.
Well, I think perhaps one of the missing ingredients of the plan is Baha'u'llah, because like a divine physician that prescribes a cure if you're sick, and you can decide, I'm not sick, I'm not going to take the cure, and continue to be ill. And I think our society is in the same position today. We continually reject the divine physician, and we reject the remedy that will bring about the unity. So I think that the glue that holds this whole process together is Baha'u'llah, because Baha'u'llah is the author of the remedy, or the physician that's giving the medicine. One of the things that seems to me is that people, if we could look out from planet Earth and some foe outside of Earth was going to destroy Earth, then maybe we could pull together, united, to fight a common foe. But it seems like until that time comes, people are content with being with separatist movements here and there. But by turning to these principles, I think that Douglas is talking about, and this unity that Baha'u'llah talks about, then we can bring mankind into a true 20th century.
And actually, the common foe really is disunity. So we want to unite together in unity.
Okay. Well, again, I want to thank my guest, which is Paul, and thank my co-host Pam. And for those of you, we will be on Tuesdays at 6 and Wednesdays at 8. Thank you very much.
Let me tell you about the spirit of the new wave. Let me tell you about something. Vision only brings us ruin and strife. Brothers, why can't we be united? Vision only brings us ruin and strife. Brothers, why can't we be united? So we say, unity in diversity.